So before I get to these really cool outtakes, I wanted to let you guys know of a new project that I'm working on. I'm starting a new podcast that is sort of affiliated with Camp Herman, as Camp Herman's not going anywhere. I'm not going anywhere, but I am starting a new true crime series called True Fringe, and the West Side of Saturn sort of inspired that. So what you could do right now is the podcast is already set up, and you could go over to True Fringe. You could watch all the episodes of the West Side of Saturn there, and please follow and be looking for episodes. It's gonna run maybe like one episode every 2-3 weeks, maybe even a month, because we're really gonna go deep, deep, deep into some of these cases, and we're going to pull on the supernatural thread of those cases, because a lot of the true crime documentaries will only insinuate a supernatural connection, but they'll never pull on that thread and let you know what's really going on there. So let's get to these outtakes of the West Side of Saturn. So this first one is from Tertius Fourier. He is actually partly guilty for this series ever coming to being. He's the one who introduced me to the first video I watched on the West Side of Saturn.
If I remember correctly, somewhere in South America, where a guy attended a white magic festival and he got drunk, and the next moment he woke up and he was like in this coffin, and people were actually trying to sacrifice him. Long story short, when he got out and he went to the police and he told them, listen, I was almost a victim of a satanic sacrifice, the police were just like, no, you're just drunk, go home and sleep it off. Whether it's kind of a low-level demonic entity, or whether it's like a fallen angel like Enlil or whoever, they have one thing in mind, and that is they hate humanity. They hate the triune God, and they hate humanity, and they will play any game with you to lure you in and then basically destroy you.
This next outtake comes from Tom Dunn's interview. It was interesting how he came into the picture. I do believe him and a friend had went to, I think, the Mothman Festival out in Ohio. And the friend that he was with was like telling him, hey, man, you got to check this out. You got to check this docuseries out. And Tom Dunn saw it. And he was like, Mike, I've got more information for you. And like on the initial phone call that Tom and I had, like I thought he was going to yell at me that I had like information wrong, which seriously, it would have been okay. Tom Dunn's a warrior, next to getting Russ Dizdar, Tom Dunn is the man. As he did train with Russ Dizdar for a very long time. And Russ Dizdar is very dear to my heart, as I am very, very inspired by him. But here's a raw form outtake with me and Tom Dunn talking.
There's so many cases. It's like there was this guy, I think it was out of Colorado, who killed his wife and 2 kids. Okay. You remember this case recently, and he dumped them into a giant oil tank, and then he acted like nothing was wrong. Well, they knew immediately this guy did it. We have all the evidence, but now people are speculating, well, there's more to it. There's more to it than this. I think it's almost like human nature that we want to add this mystery and add this drama to something that's not there. We have all the information in that case. It's like, do we need anything more? And then again, Mike, there could be more. And I get that. But I feel like a lot of times that we add, or we want there to be more. Okay. I'll give you an example real quick. I just saw a story this morning that the FBI believes a whistleblower came out, and they're saying, that as a matter of fact, whoever this whistleblower is, that Jeffrey Dahmer was the one that killed Adam Walsh. And I don't feel like it fits Dahmer's MO, but they're saying that he did this, and they're saying the police wanted Otis O'Toole so they wouldn't shift direction. Okay. So in a similar way, how the West Memphis wanted these three because they wanted to close the case up. Okay. They were unwilling to shift direction. I think that's, maybe there's a similarity there of, I don't think Otis O'Toole was ever indicted on the murder of Adam Walsh, but they really believe Jeffrey Dahmer was involved, in the kidnapping and murder of Adam Walsh. I don't know if that's true or not, but I think the number one thing they want is power. Depending on who it is. Okay. We've talked about this recently on our show. There's different motives for different people. Okay. If you're talking about your self-styled Satanist teenager that picks up a satanic Bible or picks up some occultic books somewhere, I think they want power. They want to use the occult to get a girlfriend. They want to use the occult to get something. Okay. When it comes to the elites, the generational Satanists, they have all the money. I think the reason that they're doing what they're doing is they want to maintain the control. They love the destruction of the innocent. Okay. We could talk about abortion as a ritual. Okay. That's happening all over the place. But these stories that come out, okay, from people that have connections. I'm thinking about the banker, and I can't remember his name. Maybe you've seen this testimony of this. He was like some Dutch banker, and he got up and he started rubbing elbows with these guys. And he's like, I want out. You guys are killing kids. And the guy became emotional. He started crying during that part of the interview. And you can tell this guy saw that. You can tell that he was in a room somewhere and they were killing kids. They initiated him. They brought him in through sex. And first it started out through satanic sex. And then, they bring him in a little bit higher and then a little bit higher. Then he saw kids being sacrificed. He's like, nope, deal breaker. I don't want anything to do with this. His testimony's out there. I can't think of what his name is right now, but, I think they want power. They want control. They believe that Satan is God, that Lucifer is God, and they want to please him. Okay. They hate the living Christ, the biblical Jesus, and they want to do anything that they can to stop Christianity. Okay. We're seeing that play out in our culture in the West right now in America. And we don't see the satanic part of it. We see the political part of it. Okay. But I believe that there are, generational Satanist, occultic, powerful elites behind these things. It's and behind the people, obviously, is a plan. Okay. That it's been in place for 2,000 years. Okay. In 2 Thessalonians, it talks about the secret power of lawlessness. Okay. That's a power working behind the scenes. Plan A was to kill Jesus. That backfired. Plan B, okay, we see spoken about in the Bible, in the book of Daniel, in the book of Revelation, in, writings of Paul, in Matthew 24. Satan keeps getting beat over and over again, but he's crazy enough to think that sometime he's going to win. And he wants to be crowned king of this world. And that's, I don't know what the timeline is, and I don't know where we're at, but I believe that one of these days there's going to be a rise of an antichrist, and the antichrist isn't going to take power. He's like, okay, I need to go ahead and get an army. No, his army is already going to be in place. And when he, when he takes that power, whenever that is, I'm not one of those guys that sets dates or thinks it's next year or in the next 10 years. It could be any time, but
yeah. Where did the occult get their knowledge of how to get power? Like, where does, I know that's a very long answer, probably.
Well, we can look through, we can look in the Bible and we can see governments trying to utilize occult powers. Okay. Look at Pharaoh. Okay, right in the beginning, he's the number one politician in the world. He's the number one military leader in the world. And he has two occultists working right by his side, okay, that are doing magic. And then, okay, it's a power encounter against Moses, okay? Look at Nebuchadnezzar. He was surrounded by occultists, okay? Look at Ezekiel chapter 8. Ezekiel was showing what was going on in the middle of the night, okay, in the temple where it was supposed to be, worshipers of Yahweh. They were doing satanic rituals in the temple, and God wanted it exposed. So trying to answer your question here, where do they get it? We could talk about the ancient mystery schools. We could talk about so many things, okay? But we can look at the influence, okay, of Satan from the beginning of time, okay? They would say that they are getting it from the ascended masters. They're getting it from, just the ether or whatever. And, they might say we're getting it from aliens. It doesn't matter. Satan has many masks. Ultimately, it comes from the enemy, and it's a deception, okay? And he has a lot of lies, and he doesn't care which one he gets you with as long as he gets you. It's interesting that the occult, their source material is God's word. Like if we lived in a world where the Bible didn't exist, where would the occult be? There would be no occult. Okay. That's their source material. The Bible talks about, in Revelation, in Daniel, the boldness and the arrogance of Satan. Okay. He's like a sociopath or a psychopath. He's been beaten over and over and over and over again, but he's crazy enough to think that one time he's actually going to be able to win. Okay. He is not well adjusted. He's not stable. Okay. Obviously we know that God is not moved. He's in complete control, and the enemy can't do anything without, God allowing it. Okay. And we can look, God told us how everything's going to play out. He didn't tell us when it was going to play out. He told us seasons, okay, and signs that we could look for. When you could put two occultists or two Satanists side by side and they'll never agree, okay? One could say, yes, they're trying to expedite that process. The other one could say, no, we're just trying to take over the world. We reject this or that or whatever. So I think for many of them that it's true. And if Satan knows, okay, this is a being that is powerful, but not more powerful than God. He knows, and the Bible says he knows his time is short. Okay, so and he behaves a certain way accordingly. He's going to try to interrupt the plans. Okay. Now, personally, and we're not going to try to get too deep theologically. That could be a strategy why God says that, hey, nobody knows except for the Father when all this is going to happen. Maybe because that's a strategy for not allowing, Satan to have this information. Not that Satan could possibly overcome God. He can't, but maybe that's part of the reason. Okay. Yeah. So maybe there's rules and things like that. We could sit around, a table and talk about that kind of stuff and have a lot of fun. But
this next one is just me talking about narcissism and how Aleister Crowley defines magic. Very interesting. Damian could very well be a compulsive liar with narcissistic tendencies mixed in with this blacking out and hallucinations. A narcissist has no problem with lying to protect themselves, and they will do anything they can do to manipulate a situation. So it's interesting if you look at the definition to the word magic with a K. Aleister Crowley defines it like this: the science and art of causing change to occur in conformity with one's will. So this next clip was supposed to be the intro to episode 5, but the more and more I watched it, I just felt like it didn't fit, as interesting as it as it is. But there was something called the False Memory Syndrome Foundation that rose up during the time of satanic panic to kind of, get people to think that, every satanic panic case was lies. You won't believe what I found out about this foundation. It's really, really crazy. Almost deserves its own documentary. Roll the clip. We truly do live in a world of information wars. Anything and everything that's controversial is met by opposers and debunkers. And satanic ritual abuse is no exception.
Well, if one does a search, and starts trying to look up satanic ritual abuse, one is almost instantly confronted with the idea that it simply doesn't exist, that it's a mass hallucination effect, and the kids these memories are being planted. A lot of that was propagated by a foundation called the False Memory Syndrome Foundation.
The debunkers of SRA victims are saying that the events never took place and that the therapist planted the ideas in the head of the victim. The year is 1990, and a young girl named Jennifer Freyd was having a lot of anxiety about an upcoming visit from her parents. So she decided to address the issue with her therapist. And her therapist used a method called recovered memory therapy. During the therapy session, the therapist allegedly uncovered memories of Jennifer being abused by her dad, Peter. Both her uncle and her grandparents encouraged her to bring these allegations into the light, as there seemed to be an underlying history of abuse, as Peter and his wife grew up in the same household as step-siblings, but later on got married. In response to these allegations of abuse, Peter Freyd, with his therapist, Ralph Underwager, they decide to start the False Memory Syndrome Foundation to quote unquote protect people falsely accused of abuse. So here's where it gets really weird. In 1993, an article that Underwager did with a pro-pedophile magazine came to the surface. This article revealed that Underwager was a supporter of pedophilia. He even states in the interview that he's a theologian and that he believes that God's will for pedophiles is to fulfill their desires and that they deserve closeness. After this article came to the surface, Ralph Underwager resigned from the foundation. The False Memory Syndrome Foundation, however, went on for a few more decades until it was dissolved in 2019. So if you come across the False Memory Syndrome Foundation's research regarding SRAs, they debunk nothing, but they lend more evidence to something sinister going on. This next one comes from an affidavit that was done, I believe, in 2001 for an appeal that they were going through, and Dr. George Woods did an extensive mental evaluation of Damien Echols. I thought it was too much to put in. It was just so much information, but just hearing it by itself could give you more insight into this man's mental breakdown life that he was living in. I do pray for him, though. It's very, very sad if he was demonically possessed. Anyway, roll the clip. Mr. Echols has a serious mental illness characterized by grandiose and persecutory delusions, auditory and visual hallucinations, disordered thought processes, substantial lack of insight, and chronic incapacitating mood swings. Mr. Echols' mental illness was established before the offense and subsequent legal proceedings. The Social Security Administration determined that Mr. Echols was 100% disabled due to his mental impairment and granted him full disability benefits. So Dr. George Woods actually does claim that Damian because of his mental illness, is completely incompetent to stand trial. However, he goes on to say this. Mr. Echols had no control over his mental illness, nor did he possess the skills or insight to mitigate his psychosis or delusions prior to or during his trial. His mental illness, combined with his immaturity and the enormous stress of his charges, incarceration, and trial, substantially impaired his perception of reality. Lack of insight, low tolerance for stress, and immaturity are strong characteristic features of chronic mental illness. Mr. Echols' accounts of his symptoms since childhood are consistent with severe traumatic stress disorders or mood disorders. He reported periods of disassociation when he lost long spans of time. He also endorsed numerous physical problems, including frequent and severe headaches, for which he was treated with prescription medications as a child. He also had heart palpitations, difficulty breathing. He was diagnosed with and treated for asthma and chronic sleeping disorders. He reported having nightmares from which he awakened in a terrified state as often as twice a night. These symptoms persisted throughout childhood and adolescence and grew to include periods of psychosis. Mr. Echols became so debilitated by his escalating mental illness that he was hospitalized 3 times during the year prior to his arrest. His diagnoses included mood disorder, psychosis, not otherwise specified, and severe depression. He was evaluated by the Social Security Administration and given full disability benefits on the bias of his mental illness. So I have a really hard time believing that an innocent person would blow kisses at the victim's parents. But if Damian really was out of touch with reality and his mental illness is severe as they're saying it is, I do think it's possible that Damian could be innocent and be blowing kisses at the victim's parents. And I'll tell you why. Could it be that Damian was traumatized as a child and that he created multiple personalities in his mind to protect himself? And those multiple personalities were possessed by a demonic force, and that Damian really didn't even know what was going down when it was happening. There's no way to put a demon on trial, and there's no way to prove in a court of law that Damian was possessed by a demonic force. But I'm not willing to pull that possibility off the table. So this next one comes from a Facebook post that I found from Damien Echols. Go ahead and roll it. So get this. Damien Echols, who is still guilty in the eyes of the law, is summoning a quote-unquote God from ancient history that demands child sacrifice. And not only that, but Damian on his Facebook page is quoting Aleister Crowley talking about the angel of the abyss, the angel of the bottomless pit, who ultimately is Saturn, according to Derek Gilbert's research. Right here is the actual Facebook post. I'm going to read it for you. It's called The Angel and the Abyss. It should never be forgotten for a single moment that the central and essential work of a magician is the attainment of the knowledge and conversation of the holy guardian angel. Once he has achieved this, he must, of course, be left entirely in the hands of that angel, who can be invariably and inevitably relied upon to lead him to the further great step, crossing of the abyss and the attainment of the grade of Master of the Temple. And that's a quote by Aleister Crowley. Here's another Facebook post by Damien Echols that I found very interesting. I'm going to go ahead and read this one for you too. More often than you'd think, I still get messages from fundamentalist Christians telling me I must accept their religion or suffer for eternity. They tell me that what I teach is against Christ. I usually don't respond as if I know that what they are saying isn't biblical. In fact, the prophets of the Old Testament are all magicians. The Bible calls Daniel of the lion's den not only a magician, but the master of magicians. It says when he was a child, the king Nebuchadnezzar had him sent to be trained by the Chaldeans, which is what the Bible calls those who lived in the marshes of Mesopotamia. To this day, archaeologists still do not understand what would cause the first world empire to choose such an inhospitable, marshy area to build the city of Nefer. But the Sumerians said it was because the land was the home of the god Enlil, the Lord of heaven. Daniel, one of the greatest prophets of the Bible, was trained by the priest of Enlil, magicians who studied the stars. If you'd like to join me for a tour of the Met, where we will get to explore these stories and artifacts in great depth, you can find the link here. And to those who have already accompanied me, thank you for indulging me in my passion. So the only commentary I really have on that is, yeah, Damian is absolutely right. Even Moses himself was a magician. Daniel himself was trained as a magician. But guess what? God, Elohim of all the Elohims, the God of gods, Yahweh, called Daniel out of that. And God spoke directly to Daniel to be holy and to speak holy and to prophesy holy. And Damien himself calls Daniel one of the greatest prophets in the Bible. Well, what did Daniel prophesy that made him so great? He prophesied of the coming of the Messiah. Daniel didn't do what he did because he was trained up as a magician. Daniel did what he did because he spoke to the Elohim of Elohims, to the God of gods, the one and only creator God, Yahweh, period. This next outtake is an interview between me and Jason Pillow. I don't need to say anything about it. He's always a good conversation. Guys, I love you. Thank you for sticking around. Thank you for watching. So much more to come. Please go to True Fringe on Spotify and follow. So much more to come. I'll see you on Camp Hermon as well. God bless. Of course, this is total speculation, but it seems to me that Damian was a part of something that was bigger than him. Would you?
Oh, he most definitely was. And we see clear indications of that, not just in the knowledge that he pertained, because some of the stuff he talked about, yeah, you can find it in books here and there, like how to write ancient alphabet or runes or things of that nature and be able to translate them so it's code that people can't break. I mean, that's a basic cipher, that's not that complicated to do. And you can find that knowledge very easily these days. But back then, it's not like you're going to go to the public library and just come across that. So these books and stuff were given to him by someone that knew what they were doing. You got to think, this is 1994. This is not like it is now. This is not the days of Amazon where, I'm just going to type in this, I'm going to order it, and look, it's at my house 2 days later. It didn't work like that back then. In order to get a hold of books that had this type of knowledge and stuff in them, you either had to know someone that had access to this, or you had to be very, very close with certain people that owned occult shops and stuff like that knew how to get a hold of the materials for you. Because even today, this isn't really commonly found knowledge that's in the occult bookstores. There are some authors that go directly into it, but they're few and far between because the greatest currency in the world of the occult is knowledge. So this would tell me, especially if you calculate in HBO's direct involvement. I mean, this is HBO. Why in God's name would HBO be like, oh, look, there's this trial going on in Memphis. We should do a documentary about it that nobody's ever heard of, that was being kept quiet and not publicized in the mass media? It doesn't add up.
Yeah.
You know? And then you start calculating into the Hail Marys the prosecutors were throwing and the Hail Marys that the defense attorneys were throwing, trying to bring in other people. Well, we think it was this guy that had a brain tumor and can't even connect his sentences properly, you know, and you know, hey, the HBO staff gave us this knife that came from this dude and it's got the child's blood on it. You know, there's a difference between coincidence and subversion. You know, things don't happen by chance. So if you look at the evidence as a whole, you see very clearly that there's a direct influence coming from above to silence this, drown it out from the eyes of the public, and try and pass off this thing as, oh, there's no occultism here. This didn't happen. These people are crazy. They're trying to bury it because Memphis and Arkansas have been such strongholds for the Luciferians, the Druids, the Brotherhood, the Masons, that they didn't want the exposure happening in this region.
So I found this like psychological assessment on Damian that was done for an appeal. Like I think it was the appeal for the second that was happening in the second documentary. And so he's talking to this psychiatrist, and he told the psychiatrist that he literally thought that he was a supreme being. In addition to that, it's in the same psych eval, but it's way far apart. But he talks about how he has hours where he would black out and he would do stuff, and he would have no idea what he did. Now, this is coming from his own admission, Damian's own admission. So what I would like you to do is maybe explain a little bit of the multiple personality, the DID, how that works, and if this is what was happening to Damian, you know, we can maybe just speculate on that a little bit. I think that the evidence is there to at least be able to say, hey, look, this dude had a crappy childhood, probably broke off, you know, in his mind, and now he's literally claiming that he blacks out. So I don't know, maybe we could start off with you just explaining the idea of DID, and then we could take it from there.
Well, before I get into DID, let me make something very clear. There's only two instances that cause that to happen. Okay. One is dissociative identity disorder with multiple personalities. The other is through demonic possession, true demonic possession. You know, that demon takes hold. It's the one in charge and in control of your body. Your mind is shut down at that point. You might get suppressed memories after a while of what the demon did because it's looking and operating through your eyes and directly connected to your central nervous system. But the only way to make the clear delineation between the two is by doing a complete psychological eval of Damian and actually determining whether or not he switches. You have to look for glitches. You have to look for alternate personalities. Do they come forward? Do they surface? You know, it's just like in my case, my wife has seen me switch, you know, from one altar to the other. My behavior is different. My mannerisms are different. I'll say things that she didn't know that I knew or things of that nature. And it's because it's an alternate personality that has surfaced. In the case of demonic, it's different in that there's a switch there. However, it's the demon enacting its will upon the individual and using it to carry out its lust and what it desires to do. This is the reason why in certain Christian circles there's a lot of debate on whether DID is a real thing or if it's just at the hands of demons, which in my case, we know it's not because I have been through deliverance. There are no demons there. They cannot be there. So there's a clear, indicator that this is dissociative identity disorder with me as opposed to demonic entities. And another way you can tell this is through the rites of deliverance, casting the demon out of somebody. Demons have to obey the authority of Christ. They have to. It's just like with me, the first time I realized that something wasn't right and that it was parts of me rather than a demonic entity was, the voices started, and I had talked to my pastor at the time, and he said, well, if it's demons, I have to obey the authority of Christ. So I told it to be, silenced and rebuked it in Jesus' name. And I simply got to shut up. And I'm like, wait a minute. Like, that's not supposed to happen. So then I had to start taking things more seriously and looking for the explanations and researching what had been done to me, which is when the memories started to surface and everything else. And I had to go through the process of going to the locations that these memories were at to further jog the memory and cause them to come back so I could place myself there and say, okay, yes, this actually happened. And then it led into the process of healing through Christ and everything else. Because dissociative identity disorder is caused through trauma and fear. You put so much trauma on an individual, so much fear on an individual that if their mind doesn't go into survival mode and disassociate and shut off the conscious mind and create a new, different identity, it will literally kill the person. It's a survival mechanism that's built into the human body. It's a blessing in one way and a curse in the other, So this is what causes multiple personality disorder, or now known as DID, dissociative identity disorder. These are events that were so dramatic that the person's mind disassociated, shut down, a new personality was created in order to bear the strain of what was going on, just to preserve the life of the individual. Now, in the case of occult programming, they will do that. And when the new personality surfaces, they will program it and train it to their intents and purposes. They will conduct rituals to summon demons, place them into individual as controlling mechanisms to keep the alternate personalities in line and maintain the structure so that they can be called on or activated at will.
Do you think it's possible that Damian was ritualized and demonized by an upper occult members?
It's very possible that his past doesn't differ too much from mine, given his knowledge and what he was into.
Yeah. So you say you're talking about like the difference between a DID and like a demon possession, a demonic possession. In this case, for this guy, Damien says that I black out for hours at a time. So it's very possible that he would have had demons because, obviously they're doing rituals to get bigger and stronger demons.
Yeah.
So it's possible that he was literally, he was just demonically possessed.
It's a very, very strong possibility given what he was into. The only way that we could really confirm satanic ritual abuse being put on him, the only way we could confirm him being DID is for someone like myself or Tom Dunn or someone that's an expert in this field, or even like Sherry from Russ's SIU team, to sit down and have a conversation with this individual, because we know what to look for.